Welcome everyone to my online public scrutiny meeting for North Yorkshire Police. I am Commissioner Zoe Metcalfe and I'm Police Fire and Crime Commissioner for York and North Yorkshire. So today my team and I have revamped this meeting to give a richer layer of scrutiny, which you'll see through the addition of the item for HMIC improvement plan, and also a spotlight section that is dedicated to questions that have come into my office during the month too. Okay, so we're going to turn to the agenda. So agenda item 1 is any apologies. So we've received apologies from the Deputy Chief Constable Mabs and also Jenny Newbury from my office. And then we'll go on to the minutes. Well, the minutes and a copy of the live stream meeting are uploaded onto my website, so they can be viewed at any time. And then we'll go straight on to the performance section. So today, Elliot, you are joining us from North Yorkshire Police. Hello. Would you like to take us through this section, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. And Elaine, if you could bring up and share the presentation, please. Thank you. Thank you. If you could go on to the next slide then, please. Brilliant. Thanks very much. So the first slide in the pack today in relation to performance is as of our emergency calls, one of our most important bits, and something we've had a spotlight on for quite some time. You'll see that continuing upward trajectory of improvement within the force control room, which is something we're really proud of, and really making some progress. And you'll see at the moment for April there, the average time of answering was 9 seconds. Clearly our SLA of 90% of all calls to be answered within 10 seconds, which is a national service level agreement. And whilst we're not quite there, we're not far off it. We've had quite a bit of volume, as we always do. The volumes go up every year on year in control room around emergency calls. And I think there's a 4% increase on last month, which is actually double the demand of last year. So not only are we improving our performance, it's really important to set that in that context of the huge increase in calls as well. So we've welcomed how we achieve this and how we're going to continue to achieve it. We've welcomed new recruits into the force control room. So clearly a thank you to the Commissioner for making those extra resources available for us. That ongoing recruitment campaign for our comms officers, our call takers and dispatchers keeps going on. We've got courses planned for July and October, and we've got one already in place and due to finish on the 19th of June. So as soon as we get those people in and become more experienced, we'll see that that call time the SLA being met. We're really confident in the very near future. But this will bring us in July, Commissioner, to I think for the first time ever, our meeting our FTE of 112 in relation to comms officers in the control room as well, which is really good. So we're really pleased with where we're going. We know we're still on that journey, but we are making massive improvements.
Elliot, can I ask a question? I mean, it is great to see that there are improvements being made, which is really good. And I know that everyone in the force control room are working really hard to achieve this. But obviously, there's still a percentage of calls that are being answered over 10 seconds. So why is this? What's causing it?
Well, we're still in the process, Commissioner. I'm optimistic, actually, by next month. We keep seeing the figures every single day, and we're watching them now being answered in under 10 seconds, and I think you'll start to see that filter through as we get in towards next month. It's down to a number of things: volume, inexperience, as we've got new trainees in the control room, but they, as I said, they are starting to come online, which is why we're seeing it. The new, well, it's not new now, the ACC for local policing, Scott Bissett, is obviously really focused on delivery with this, because it's the engine room for the force, Commissioner. As you're aware, everything starts at the control room. So yeah, there are times when we don't get there. Mainly that's because of sheer volume of calls, rather than not having enough people in the control room as it once was. And sometimes we get those incidents on a day where something will happen and we'll get an unprecedented amount of calls in 1 or 2 minute sections around lots of members of the public phoning in, which will cause those blips as well. But as I say, we're really confident we're on track to meet that service level agreement very soon.
In April, there was an IT, there was loss of IT in the force control room. And I just wondered, could you just explain what happened? Because they were diverted, weren't they? Can you just explain a bit more about that so we can reassure the public?
I mean, if you're asking me for the technical side of it, I probably won't be able to do that. There was a technical issue within the control room in April, and all those calls get diverted actually to Humberside, pick up our calls when that happens. Since then, we've been in regular contact with the external service providers. We've had our own ICT team working within the FCR as well to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And I think it's probably really important to point out, actually, when a situation like that, when it does get diverted to Humberside, they've got the systems and the ability to take our calls, create the incidents on the system as we would do, and then transfer them back to us really quickly and electronically to our dispatchers, so people sending officers out. So there's not that much of a delay. It's quite difficult for Humberside if that happens. Clearly, they're picking up our volume, but in the same way, other forces will reciprocate when that happens for other forces too.
Thank you.
Okay, Elaine, thank you. So our non-emergency calls then, 60% answered, 34% abandoned, and we acknowledge actually that figure there is not where we want that to be. But you know, we are absolutely prioritising our 999 calls above all else, because we know that those are the ones where there is that generally that life and death call, and we have to get there. There's no national average speed of answer around this, but we, as I say, we do prioritise the 9 calls. That July intake that we're planning on again, and we get to that 112 in the force control room, will really start to help again with this as well. We have, you know, I've spoken to ACC Bissett around this, and there's been a lot of changes made to streamline the processes within that control room to free up staff from handling time to answer the further calls. I think it's also worth looking at that average time of answer is 5 minutes. Again, we'd like it a lot less than that, but actually we recognise for non-emergency and for more routine calls, 5 minutes is you know, it's not where we want to be, but so we can live with it while we try and get our 999 calls to where they need to be. So that's really that one. Have you got any questions on that one?
Well, you're not surprised to hear that I have actually,
okay.
Elliot. And you know, I'm putting this huge investment into the force control room, and I appreciate that you have got lots of recruits coming through. So when we talk about July's recruits coming in, are they actually hitting the shop floor, as it were, in the force control room, or do they have to be have to do their induction before they actually go on to into the force control room?
Yes, they will. They still have to go through the training, because again, I think the public would not expect us to sort of recruit people, put them in there and say answer those calls. So the training is quite rigorous, and rightly so. You know, we're expecting people to pick up the phone to members of the public in their hour of most need, really, to coin a phrase. But I absolutely get where you're coming from with it, but it will take us a few weeks to get those people up to speed. And you know, I will level with you, it's at a time, as you know, when our demand goes up in the summertime, so we will be working really hard. What I can tell you is that there is a contingency plan in place that the control room superintendent has, so that we're not in a position where we're waiting for figures to fail and for things not to work before we push that button and get more into the control room. We've got people we can move in, we've got trained police officers and staff that can help us pick up those calls and do that dispatching as well. So it is a process. We're on with it. There's a number of things, as I say, that the control room are doing, in particular around the triaging of calls that come in on 101. We know that we get a huge amount of calls from partner agencies, for example, and they can sit there clogging up that system as well. And it's things like that we're trying to get on top of and work with our partners to kind of free up some of that capacity.
I suppose, Elliot, really, I do agree with you. I mean, I just find it's just not good enough for the public at all that we're having 34% drop-off rate here in 101. And I'd really like to know, when are we going to see an improvement here?
Yeah, and you know, we'd agree. We think 34% is high. You will start to see an improvement, Commissioner, with those resources landing in the control room. It's something we are. I can't stress highly enough, we monitor this every single day, not only within the Chief Officer team at the Force Daily Management meeting and in the local meetings in the FCI and the Force Control Room as well. So I am optimistic that by the summertime, as we start to get more people in towards the end of the summer, we should see that really come down. I absolutely understand the frustration when people are hanging on the phone trying to get through to us as well. And I guess that you would expect me to give a bit of a plug for our online reporting here as well, because sometimes, you know, if you can report many things like crimes and intelligence online, and you don't have to sit there waiting in the phone line for that to happen. So I just urge the public again, you know, if you can't get through at that moment in time, or to think about other ways of contacting us, because you can get just as a really good response from online reporting as well, and that will divert some of that demand away from our control room and answering the phone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Elaine. So this is our policing response. Now, what we've got here is the, again, you'll see from about October, November time last year, and we've talked about this fairly frequently. These lines here indicate our response, how fast we get to incidents, and you'll see immediate urban, immediate rural, and then our priority, and then the service level agreements that sit underneath them. So we're heading up towards, in some cases we're already over the 80% and heading up towards the 90%, which is where we want to be. But we continue to see improvements, and again, every single day, monitored through our local meetings, monitored by chief officers through the Force Daily Management meeting. Sometimes it's a simple technical issue where actually an officer's attended the scene but failed to update the control room that they're on the scene, and we correct those kind of things as well. But on the whole, as you can see, continual improvements in that, which we're pleased with, and we are on track to get towards that 90%.
Elliot, please can you explain to those that are watching what immediate, urban, rural and priority is, just for everybody watching?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a bit confusing. So an immediate urban an immediate incident is one that we would call an emergency incident. And if in any effect, it would be an incident which would be classed as a danger to life, a serious injury, serious damage to property, use of violence or that threat of violence, everything that you would consider an emergency incident. So an emergency urban will be in a built-up conurbation, built-up area, our cities and our towns, and immediate rural will be out in the countryside and the more remote villages. So our target or our targets for that are 15 minutes. And in most cases, Commissioner, it's really worth saying we're there in far less time than that. It doesn't take us 15 minutes to get there. A little bit more latitude around the rural because we recognise in this force in particular the geography, and there's some work being done by ACC Bissett and the local commanders at the moment to start to review officer locations to ensure that we can, ensure we can service that demand within the national times and make sure we've got our people in the right places when we're expecting that demand to come in.
I've got a question around, I mean, don't get me wrong, I can see from the graph and every time we do these meetings, there is definitely an improvement, which is great. But we seem to be going for the national standard of 80%. But, I really would like to see 80% as the minimum standard and that we're closer. The target really should be closer to 100% going forward. Your comments on that, please, Elliot.
Commissioner, I think I speak on behalf of all the chief officer team when I say that no one in the force aspires to mediocrity. We would prefer to be an outstanding force providing an exemplary service to the public. We recognise, if you look at what this graph actually recognises, it's the statistical data which shows how fast we are getting to you when you really, really need us. At the time when you're on your most urgent need, you call us and we're getting there. So yeah, absolutely, 80% is fine, but we would much prefer to be 90 and over. Recognising it's unlikely, we may have some days, in fact we have had some days, Chief, I think you'll agree, when we've hit 100% on our urban ones, and we're quite happy to break that down and share that with you, and we do celebrate that. But there will be days, for example, when let's say an incident comes in to look out for a particular vehicle, and because it's urgent, it might be graded as an immediate, but actually we go out and we search for it, we can't find it, and actually nobody said, well, we're on the scene because they're searching. So it's things like that that sometimes mean we can never meet that 100, but we are, you know, on the whole pushing up really high with that. And the chief's got her hand up.
Yes. Lisa, come in.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I suppose just to add to this, that there's lots of really clever demand modelling software, and we're going to use some of that software to say, right, what is the perfect number of people to have in a specific place at a specific time? And that demand modelling will tell us how many people we need to be in a specific place at a specific time if we wanted to hit 100%, or if you want to hit 95% or 90% or 80%. And then it's a case of, isn't it, affordability and where you need to put your resources to deliver the best possible service to keep our communities safe. And I think if we had unlimited budget, we could create a demand profile where we know we're going to hit 100% of our calls all of the time. But at a guess, and we don't have that data in front of us, it would be unaffordable for policing. So we have to strike that balance of affordability, resources where they're needed in other areas of demand, like detectives and safeguarding. Obviously, we talk about the child protection inspection quite a lot on these meetings. So to balance that with the other high risk areas that cause high harm to the public, I suppose it's for us to have that conversation with you, Commissioner, about this is what 100% attendance costs. Where should we put our resources? How much precept shall we ask for? So there is a formula that will tell us what 100% would cost us.
I just want to make sure, Chief, that, you know, we're not just settling for, you know, the national standard. I'd like to be, you know, aiming a lot higher than that, because I think it's what the public of North Yorkshire and York deserve, you know, and that's what I'm trying to get from you, that you're not just going to settle for that 80%, you're going to keep on pushing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'd echo that, Commissioner, and I know I speak on behalf of ACC BISIT. We, again, coming back to this is something that every single morning one of the chief officers is talking to our team about and saying, well, why did that one go over? Why have we not met that one in particular? And where there occasionally you'll get one where there was actually resources tied up and we had to free another nearest resource up, so there's a bit more travelling time. But all I can tell you is the scrutiny. We won't stop. We won't say we've reached 80. It's all good now. Let's move on to something new. We will keep the pressure on, because you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Elaine. So our overall crime levels fairly static. You can see at the moment this year we've got that drop in crime. The big thing for us around crime levels is to try and flatten the peaks, because those peaks in demand, those peaks there show rising crime in particular areas, usually starting around this time of year and peaking in the summertime. A lot of that can end up being public order type offences, and, you know, things that you'd associate with the nighttime economy, the warmer weather, people out more and out longer as well. But it actually, in every single case except fraud, we're lower than the national average, and in some cases really significantly lower. This is still, and I want to get this message out, because I think this is, you know, the fear of crime sometimes is you know, can run rampant. This is still the safest place in England and Wales. This is an amazing place to live, and it's very, very safe. That doesn't mean to say, like you said in the last slide, that we're there resting on our laurels thinking, oh, we're fine, we've got low crime. We will continue to tackle it and continue to work to beat that. So yeah, those are the issues there. The fraud one is higher. We do record fraud, Commissioner, differently to every other force. And I think that's probably worth just mentioning. You know, a lot of forces just hand everything off to action fraud and away it goes. We don't do that. We offer what we call an exemplary service around fraud. We recognise the impact it has on communities. We understand the impact it has on vulnerable communities, some of the elderly victims of fraud where they lose huge amounts of money. So we don't just refer it on, we record it on our system so we can ensure we're able to provide victim contact and that safeguarding provided by our neighbourhood teams as well.
Can I ask a question? I recently met with businesses in and around the county, and I think there's a perception that when crimes are reported, that it's not actioned very quickly in a timely manner by North Yorkshire Police, and there's a feeling that shops are sometimes not bothering to report crimes because of that. So I'm concerned that your stats are skewed because actually you're not getting the true picture. So can you tell me what work you're doing with the retail sector to improve reporting and outcomes, please, Elliot?
Yeah, we've got a retail crime procedure which we changed at the start of the year. I think it's around February time, and this was designed to be a little bit easier and smoother both for the retailers and for ourselves. So where a retailer, for example, was reporting a theft, but there was nobody there, they got CCTV evidence, etc. Quite often that would mean we'd have to deploy an officer to the shop at some point, gather the CCTV, take the report, etc., etc. And that was usually at a time that was convenient to us and not the retailers as well, and that's our downtime. So we've got the retail initiative, which means that retailers can package up the CCTV. There's a pack they can fill in, say how it's done, and send it in. I think it's fair to say we probably haven't seen the best uptake on that one. And I was talking to someone about this fairly recently. And there's now going to be and I'll put my hands up to this, we probably should have thought of this when we started, in all fairness. There's now going to be a digital way of doing it rather than the manual way, so that people can submit it through the single online home, which will be a lot slicker, a lot easier for people to do. And I think once we start to see that, and we will publicise that again with businesses and retailers, we should start to see more of that coming through. It's theft, it's a crime, it's not something that we're just going to say we're not dealing with, because it really is important. And I think it's really important to say as well that still, if violence is involved, if a suspect has been detained, or there's other factors around vulnerability, then we will still attend. We will still go there. We will still deal with that as what we used to call in my day, way back when, dealing with shoplifters was bread and butter for us, and we still will deal with those. But just to offer that reassurance to the retail sector, Commissioner, through my head of crime as well, who will be working with them on this, we will streamline that and monitor it, and maybe something later on in the year bring back and say how that's going and report back on the uptake.
That would be great. Thanks, Elliot.
Problem. Next slide, please, Elaine. So burglary residential, as you can see, is down. I want to be really honest. There has been a change in recording. It's still down, even with the change in recording, quite significantly down as well. And we've done a huge amount of work in North Yorkshire Police through my head of crime, Detective Superintendent Andrea Kell, and her team, in improving the force's response to burglary. We've had a burglary summit very recently where we pulled in people from intelligence, from neighbourhoods, from investigators, all together in a summit to talk about our response to this, how we can improve it, and how we can shift the dial to make sure that we're starting to not only reduce the amount of burglaries, but improve our, effectively, in old money, our detection rate, how many of these we're detecting. And we are doing a huge amount of work on it. There's still a lot to do. We've got Op Respond in City of York and in County now, which is focusing on burglary and robbery. And I think some of the success here is really looking at, if you look at our resolved outcome rate, it's still low, but it has increased, and it is still increasing, and belies the fact that, for example, over on the coast at the moment, their detection rate for burglary is 8% and climbing. So we are really starting to make some inroads into this. What we'd like to see is that across the force, and again, recognising that we should be a good force and not in line with the national average, getting those detection rates up where they really should be. We've done a huge amount of training with new recruits. We've done a lot of training with our force control room as well, so that they understand how to advise victims of burglary, around forensics, for example. We attend every burglary to a house. So we're giving a good response. We're just starting to see that bear fruit now in relation to the detections.
Elliot, I still have a massive concern there. I know you've increased your outcome rate. It's still so low, and I'm really concerned about what specifically you're going to do for the outcome rate, not just about the detection rate? You know, that is a real concern to the public.
Yeah, I'll probably clear that up. I'm using old language. Detection rate for me is outcome rate, and it's
right.
just I'm an old detective. So the outcome rate for us it is low, Commissioner. Absolutely is, and it's not acceptable at the level it's currently at. But as I say, we are putting a huge amount of resource into it, a huge amount of focus on it. It features heavily in our day-to-day. We monitor again through our daily management meeting. How many burglaries have we had? Where are they? It features in our forced tasking. So, for example, we've looked at the burglaries and the theft in rural areas around the GPS pieces of equipment from farm. You know, really causes huge disruption, and we're focusing on not just dealing with the actual offence itself, but trying to resolve it so it doesn't happen again. It isn't where we want it to be, but what I will say is, I'll come back to, we are starting to improve it. It is starting to increase, and we're starting to see the results. And I would like to see the results of that to us to get to the point where we're in line with the national average very, very soon, but exceeding it really by the start of next year is where I'd like. Chief, sorry, you got your hand up.
Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner. I suppose it's just to, qualify the point you make, Commissioner. This is a really intrusive crime. And burglary is a real focus, because this is somebody intruding on your personal space where you should feel safe. So it really plays into the feel safe. So if someone in your street has been burgled, it has a massive effect on how safe that person feels, even though they're not the victim of the burglary. So I would just want to point out that residential burglary is not just houses. So I suppose just to reassure the public that it's all outbuildings, sheds, etc. So you might get a situation where a series of sheds are broken into, there's no forensic evidence, nobody's seen anything, etc. And that massively impacts on the detection stroke outcome rate. If you get a series of outbuilding burglaries where there isn't any evidence to detect them, it has a big impact on the percentage. That's still not good enough. We need to use intelligence more to target offenders, which is in our plan on a page. We need to maximise the use of the things that enable us to detect burglary. And there's lots and lots. I won't go into them here because some of them are operationally sensitive, but we absolutely have a plan. And it's spearheaded by a detective chief inspector who is working alongside colleagues to make sure we maximise all of those opportunities to target offenders and detect burglary.
Thanks, Chief. And again, Commissioner, just to follow on from that, you know, sometimes it's about going back to basics, which is what we've done. So the old-fashioned thing of, in some people's minds, house-to-house inquiries. So teaching our staff and our officers again why we do this, what good house-to-house inquiries looks like, and what the purpose. Because it's not just about gathering that intelligence, as the Chief has just said, but it's also about making people feel safe. We're on this, we're here, we're watching, we're trying to resolve this as well. So lots of work going on, and it features on our control strategy as well, so that we have got, as the Chief said, detective superintendent overseeing it, and then the detective chief inspector underneath, with the tactical plan leading it.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next slide, please, Elaine. So violent crime, and when tracked over that 12-month period, you can see the reduction and the continued reduction. We would anticipate a rise in violent crime as we move into the warmer summer months. It happens every year, and again, this is the bit where the prevention is far, far better than us having to deal with it and detect it. At the last what we call our forced tasking meeting, we were aligning some of our operational resources in Alec's world, actually, from specialist operations into our nighttime economy coming up, so that we know exactly where we're likely to get our hotspots, where we're likely to have people feel less safe, and putting resources in those places at that time to prevent that happening in the first place. And we know that with alcohol in particular and violent crime in town centres, the early action is far, far better on the night time than sitting there waiting for it to get worse. So working with pubs, clubs all across the county, through local commanders, to make sure that we are intervening early in those. And I would like to see continue. I'd love to see those figures stay where they are through the summertime. Would make a big difference to the people of North Yorkshire as they're out and about on the nighttime economy in particular. In relation to sorry, have you got any questions in relation to the violent crime bit, Commissioner?
No, it's just a vehicle crime. You know, why has it gone up?
Yeah, I probably just one thing I'll touch on just before I move on to that about the violent crime as well is obviously we've got the serious violence reduction that we're tackling at the moment. And I think it's just worth mentioning that we've got that analyst in place from that. We've got the strategy we delivered in the autumn. That's going to be implemented in January in line with the Home Office direction as well. Loads of partners involved in that, so the statutory partners as well as education, health, etc. involved in it, and we're getting some significant support from the Home Office in relation to that, and that'll be delivered through the CSPs. Just in relation to vehicle crime, again, that's not where we want it to be. We know our outcomes aren't great there, but again, I have to say, whilst it looks bad, it's relatively low level and it's far lower than other forces. And a lot of these are opportunist crimes, which make them a little bit harder to detect, Commissioner. Again, this is about, though, and I hope the Chief will agree with me on this, sometimes it's about prioritising our resources where the most harm is. And as you can see, violence in the nighttime economy, burglary, it's not to say vehicle crime is not disruptive, because it is, but those other ones are probably where we're prioritising our resources at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. So this is a slide that will be familiar to anybody who follows these online public meetings, our crime investigative outcomes. And for those of you who don't, you'll be looking at that and thinking, well, what on earth does that mean? We had a backlog in our what we call our CROMU, which is where we finalise a crime. Once a crime has gone in and we've done all the work on it, we put it through to this department called CROMU, and they finalise it, and that will tell us whether we've had something resolved, whether it's been undetected, and what's happened with it, whether it's been filed. As you can see, at one point our backlog went extremely high, and that means we're not unfortunately getting the credit for the work we do as a force at times. If we're getting our positive outcomes and we're getting our resolve rates and we're getting our detections, we're not getting them put on and put through to show that that is the case. Huge amount of investment into the CROMU, which sits under the FCR as well, and under Superintendent Willie in the FCR. And so you can see we had those crimes. It was 17,000 on the 1st of January. It says now beneath 5,000 crimes. I can say today it's actually fewer than 3,500 as we currently sit.
Lisa, can I bring you in?
Thanks, Commissioner. I suppose it's just going back one step on this from a people watching, wondering why do we feed all the crimes into this pot to get this big mountain of crimes that need finalising. The National Crime Recording Standards are a very, very complex set of rules. It is a huge tome that only experts could probably understand, and what's required of us is to make sure that we finalise crimes to the national standard, and that takes a very specific kind of person that understands exactly how the counting rules work, and they have to abide by that. And the HMIC, which we're going to talk about later, our inspectorate, come in and test us against those standards. So it's not a case of just ticking a box that something can be filed. They actually dip sample and test, are we resolving and finalising those crimes to the required national standards, and are we putting the right categories on them? And those crime statistics matter because they get fed into the overall crime stats. So the figures we've just looked at of the number of burglaries, vehicle crime, etc., they are assessed and finalised as that type of crime, and that's why the figures look the way they look. If we just ticked a box saying we think that's a burglary, we might show a burglary that isn't truly a burglary, and then we're trying to investigate something that isn't the root cause correct identified crime. So people might ask themselves, why do we do this? Why do we spend all this administrative time? But it's really important that the crime statistics are accurate so that we can provide the best possible service, because there's accurate data on which we can act.
Thank you. And I just want to add that actually, you know, on the 1st of January, you were at 17,000. Yeah. Weren't you? And now you're down to 3, which is just fantastic. It's really, really good. And there's a lot of work gone on there. And I think that's great because but for me, it's just making sure that because of this swift reduction, it doesn't mean that investigations have been rushed in any way, and that all the due diligence and the process has been followed. I think it's important to, to ask that question so the public can see, yes, it has.
So you're 100%. It's the bit I was going to finish off on this. You're 100% right, because but the other bit I think is around our crimes here is the integrity, as the chief has just said, of what we're doing. That it's ethical. We're recording it ethically. We're not saying, oh, that's not a burglary. That was actually this, to keep our burglary figures down. It's ethically recorded. Everything is dip sampled by our force crime and incident registrar. The sergeants and the staff that we've put into the CROMU to tackle this have had specialist training, and as the chief said, all of that comes out is being quality assured by our force crime and incident registrar too. So I've got absolute faith that this is being done ethically. It's being done in line with our crime data integrity, and actually it's great to celebrate that success and long may it continue, and make sure that we sustain that and it stays down at low levels. We do want to see that dipping down to about 500, so we've not got anything really in that backlog. It's going through week on week, and we're getting credit for what we're actually doing. But yes, just to reassure you, that's got the utmost oversight and falls under the Deputy Chief Constable's purview as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Elaine. Section 136, mental health detentions. These are the cases where police officers have detained somebody under the Mental Health Act because they're in need of immediate care and control. And as you can see, all 23 occurrences this month, and 7.39 average officers per occurrence. That's not meaning that 7.39 officers attend every single incident. This means that it will go through different people's hands as they're doing stuff. I know there's been a lot of publicity recently in relation to a large metropolitan force where you'll have seen police cars queuing up outside the hospital. I absolutely understand that. Nobody wants to see that, and we don't want any of our officers having to be sitting with people for hours on end, because it ties them up for doing the job they want to do. But this is where it feeds into some of the other work that the force has been doing about ensuring that we've got the right person for the right care at the right time. So it says April was higher than the average incident levels. Well, it wasn't actually. It's higher than the last couple of months, but it's in line with roughly where we've seen it elsewhere over the year. And there's no detainees required to be taken out of the county this month, and 5 incidents require police transportation. We always try to get healthcare professionals where we can to transport those people, because they're the best place to do it. But occasionally it just has to be a police officer, because the needs must at that time. And if a person is in immediate need of care and control, then sometimes we are the best placed people to do it, depending on how they are at the time. 15 incidents recorded, transported by ambulance, 3 incidents not recorded. That's just data that we get in, so it doesn't mean to say that there were 3 police officers or somebody's car. That's just the data that from other agencies around that. 26.9% of detentions resulted in admission. So that's, any questions about that one, Commissioner?
Only as to, do we know why the incidents have gone up in April?
No, again, if you look back over the course of the year, the past 2 months, February and March, were relatively low, but you'll see it's not overly out of kilter with where it was in the year. We tend to get around 20 to 25 ish as an average, so it's not completely out of line with where we'd expect it to be. It's just gone up over the last month with 4 incidents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Elaine. Thank you. So our stop and search data, Commissioner, you may be aware that the stop and search and use of powers in particular has taken a monumental leap forward for us as North Yorkshire Police. We've now got a use of powers board, which covers stop and search. It covers all types of searches, use of taser, use of force, and we've got an infographic which will break all of that down. It's gone out to our strategic IAG, our IAGs, students, just to have a look at that and say, is that usable? Is that what you'd expect? Does that inform you? We've got feedback come back from that, and we're just tweaking it. I think the next stage of that, Commissioner, it's been to our chief officer team. I think after that it will be coming to yourself, so you can have a view of it, and then we will be publishing it. on a quarterly basis following our use of powers meeting, which will also be followed up with an open meeting like this, an open Teams meeting where people can join, ask questions about that data and what we're doing about it, and have that transparency around our use of powers. In relation to stop and search, you can see the figures there. Again, we're still, I believe, we're still disproportionate in our use of stop and search in relation to people from Black, Asian minority, ethnic communities. And again, Superintendent Willie is the force lead for that and is doing a huge amount of work around it to try and get to the reason. We've got much better data than we ever had. But we've still not got the answers as to why that is the case. So we're trying to work through that at the moment. But the figures there are those who have stopped, 80% were men and around about, or 81% men, around 18% women. I'm struggling to read with my glasses on the print on that. I hope you can see it, but different age groups broken down there, and then the self-defined ethnicity, where 84.8%, so nearly 85% of those stop and search were white. Some that is unknown, 9%, and then 6% Black, Asian minority, ethnic community.
I think it's important to note that I think this slide has been amended to the one that was actually published on our website. So we'll make sure that we upload this new section. Thanks, Elliot.
No, it's no problem. I think when we first looked at it as well, it looked like one of the bits that concerned me was that we've got something like 11 records that showed people searched were between the ages of 0 and 10 or 0 and 11 or whatever it was. And actually, when we dug into that, that's because age wasn't given and we couldn't get the age from them, and somebody had recorded it as 0, which is not ideal because it shows up as a child. So, and then the one child that was actually searched, it was in relation to carrying of knives, and we got intelligence to suggest that they were carrying a knife. So we did have reasonable grounds for that, and we do. And Fee Willie literally goes through pretty much all of these herself. And again, thank you to your office for the scrutiny groups that are set up around this. It's really important. Thank you, Elaine. Next slide, please.
Well, actually, Elliot, I think it's important that, so reassuring the public about the process that you have to go through when you search a child. You know, because obviously you're saying you've had one there. So just a bit of reassurance about what officers go through to ensure the child is protected and supported when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely recognise what the trauma actually of stop and search. It is for those people who have been stopped and searched. Then it can be quite an experience to have a police officer saying to you, you know, this is what I believe you are doing and what you've done. In the case of children in particular, it is really impactful. We try not to do it unless we really absolutely have to. Where we do it, there are safeguards that are in place. We do make sure that all of those are run by not only supervisors, but again now by a manager, so there's overseen, that we are ensuring that the person's looked after, contacted an adult. So there's a number of safeguards that are in place. And again, Commissioner, what I'd really like to say is if we could, if anybody that's watching this wants to come to the use of powers meeting, where we'll have those experts there can talk through all of this, offer real reassurance about the checks and balances that are in place, and we're quite happy to take those difficult questions that people might have about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. So this is our current numbers and breakdown of workforce diversity. So it says on the right side for police officers there, actual full-time equivalent 1655, but that's headcount is higher, and you'll see that on the next page. So we, as you saw in the, you'll be aware we met our uplift target by and then some. So we're really happy that we've got a good amount of police officers in the force, and that we're starting to, you know, make sure that those students that are going through their training are now released onto the front line that little bit earlier. So we're getting them through that training better and out onto the front line, which frankly is where they're going to pick up the most experience really quickly as well. So that's really good. You'll be aware that we've got our accelerated detective program with our degree entry, which has brought with it a huge amount of diversity. I think 50 to 60% of that class are women, and 11% of the class are from a Black, Asian minority ethnic community. And we've got more of those planned as well as we move into our next recruitment cycle as well. PCSO numbers there are on the right now. Breakdown of diversity, as you'll see. So for police officer, we're still increasing the number of women officers, and we're at 37.8%. So we are, it is increasing. Some forces are below us, so we're doing okay. But again, we don't want to settle for mediocrity here. Some forces are at 41%, and given that 51-ish% of the population of North Yorkshire are women, we would like to see that reflected there. And in the same way as our breakdown against ethnicity, only 2.66% of our officers are from an ethnic minority background, and then locally that's 4.2%, our demographic. And I think my Deputy Chief Constable would tell me off for not reminding people as well that whilst that is 4.2%, we have a huge swell of tourist an influx into the county from all sorts of communities to this wonderful place. So 4.2% is our static community, and that will swell with the summer months as well.
Now, Elliot, in the press, there has been this. North Yorkshire Police have put out that officer numbers were 1,701, and here it's and actual FTEs are 1,655. So they're different. So what's gone on there? Can you just explain that a bit?
Well, I can see the Chief's got her hand up, and I suspect she's chomping at the bit, so I don't make a mistake on this. Chief, over to you.
I feel I am accountable for this, Commissioner. So asking let Elliot off the hook. So this is where resource statistics are very interesting because they measure different things. But it's a really good point, Commissioner, and thank you for raising it, that FTE stands for full-time equivalent. And of course, wanting to be a very inclusive and diverse organisation, we respect the fact that some people might want to work flexibly or work part-time. So the stats that are reported in the media in the 1700s are headcount, so the physical number of people that work in the organisation. But when you balance the full-time equivalent of a number of part-time people working in a full-time equivalent role or job sharing or working across the organisation, that's why there's a difference in the statistics. But it's really important that we give people that flexibility, because we won't get the inclusion and the diversity in the organisation without those opportunities for people.
Yeah, completely 100% agree with you there, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Can I have the next slide, please, Elaine? I think this will break this down a bit further. So if you see at the top, it's exactly what the Chief was talking about, and it fluctuates a bit. So a head count there. So 1692, 1680. Obviously, we get people leave, we get people retire, and so it does go up and down. But that baseline of full-time equivalent remains 1645, but is where our target is. But that headcount target is 1665. So we are on track. It says we're on track to achieve both targets. We're there. You know, we're doing really well with this. And we know that attrition was, as it says, lower in April, and we're getting more and more transfer. It's really good, actually. To celebrate this, we attract lots of people from other forces into North Yorkshire Police, which is brilliant. Not only do they bring with them their own experience and skills of other forces as well, people like me, I should add, but they also means that we're getting police officers that are trained, ready to go. So it's good value for money. Chief, I'll hand over to you on that.
Thank you. And I just wanted to give another qualification of a different figure, that 1645 is our uplift figure. We have asked the government, and they have provided funding for an extra 20 people this year. So just wanted to say, it says 1665 on here because we've actually asked for an extra 20 people and have been given the funding for an extra 20 people by the government, which is great news for the communities of North Yorkshire.
It does make a big difference.
It does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Next slide. These are our PCSOs, Commissioner. You know, obviously, that we have recruitment. We've currently got the figures we've got around 178, and that's our our annual trajectory against our budget, and you can see we had a bit of a question around the two. When I looked at this, it says SMT Force Control Room at the top on the bottom right there, and we're thinking, why have we got two PCSOs in the Force Control Room? But surely that's not right. What it transpired was that it's just a line management structure because they work for another part of the organisation which answers into that line management structure. So just to reassure you, we don't have PCSOs sitting in the FCR. It's just a line management structure thing. We did check on. In fact, I didn't. ACC Bissett checked on that as soon as he saw it.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please, Elaine. I have a feeling it's probably very similar. Sickness absence. You can see our sickness absence there is roughly where it's static. It does dip a little bit in the winter months there, and we're going up again in spring. But coronavirus, which was clearly the top, the COVID was the top, is now starting to drop. We've had a little bit of a blip over the past month or so with COVID, as anybody who's probably on the call is aware. It's going around again, but it's well within our control limits, and there's nothing out of the ordinary in relation to our sickness. We continue to look at our long-term sick and make sure that we've got people coming back to work, and not only coming back to work, but in a supportive way, and ensuring that they've got the right well-being and the right support plans around them. So I'm comfortable with that. Any questions on that one?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I think, is that it? That's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Elliot. We went slightly over time there, but thank you. Some really good questions and answers, which I thought were very important to ask. So we're going to go straight into the Road Safety Partnership presentation. Elliot, you're going to kick us off, and then Alex, you're coming in to talk about it later. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. If you could bring up the next presentation, and I promise I will try not to talk as much on this one, and Alex will probably get a little bit more talking time. So thank you. So if you could go on to the next slide for me. This is the Strategic Road Safety Partnership. I chair this. There's a number of partners. This was originally formed back, I believe, in 2004. I think that the initial campaign was 95 alive, and the idea was to save 95 lives. It's grown, it's got bigger, and we're now in a different position, which I'll come on to what our aim is now. But it's really important to say right from the outset of this presentation that this is very much a partnership and not police-led. This is not about enforcement. This is about bringing partners together to help save lives on the road. So our partnership comprises a strategic group, which, as I said, I chair, and that oversees the work that's done, providing the strategy, the direction and objectives required, and then it oversees a tactical group. And that's chaired by Tom Hurst from Fire and Rescue locally, and they put those plans into place to meet the objectives that we set as a strategic group. But we've also got localised working groups at what I would probably describe as the pointy end of this, where people are actually on the ground delivering stuff and doing it as well. So we've got a really good structure in place, and as this slide says, Alex and I will be covering off a range of topics. And I'm aware that there'll probably be a number of questions, and I hope that some of these we could probably answer as we go along, but we'll deal with the others as well. So we'll talk about the effectiveness of the partnership. We'll talk about the update on those who are killed and the serious injuries to road users and trends. The annual report, what we're going to do with our new support around that. Our approach to speed enforcement and the review. Explanation of how the local risk is identified and what's working well, what are the challenges, and what are our next steps. So can I move to the next slide, please, Elaine?
Elliot, when you talk about partners who sit on this, could you just explain who actually sits on the partnership?
Yeah, there's a number, certainly on the strategic side of it, Commissioner, there's a number of partners. So you've got the councils, you've got local authorities, you've got Highways England, Yorkshire Ambulance Service, the Air Ambulance Service also form part of it. Clearly, Fire and Rescue Service are a major part of it with us as well, and Tom chairs the tactical working group. But there are other partners we bring in, and as we'll be talking about, academia as well, that we'll be starting to work with. So there's a number of people that come in and out as we need to expand. VOSA, for example. I'm sure Alex will probably cover some of those off in his bit as well. So whilst I chair, as I said, that strategic group, the tactical group is chaired by Tom Hurst from Fire and Rescue. But those other partner agencies I've just talked about and spoken about are absolutely vital to the delivery of this. So as it said at the top there, Vision Zero. So we're working towards Vision Zero. So what is that? So we're trying to reduce the number of people who lose their lives on our roads to as close to zero as possible. That sounds like a really ambitious target, but we honestly believe that if we can, this is achievable with the right push, and we're going to talk more about that later on. I'm going to talk to you about HMIC FRS, our inspectorate for police as well, and fire, what they do about road safety and why that's important to us as police, and why fire, and how that can help us shape our work. And we'll talk about that academic work, our current strategic focus, and the challenges that we face. Next slide, please, Elaine. Thank you. So, the Yorkshire and Humber region, in the strategy, it will tell you we've witnessed nearly 13% increase in traffic across the road network since 2010. And I know that Alex is going to come on to talking about trends and facts later on and give you some sort of background to that. But it's accurate to say that I think two things really still today remain stark, and that is most of the incidents where people lose their lives or are seriously injured on our roads take place on our rural roads, those 60-mile-an-hour roads. And actually the second fact is that motorcyclists are our most vulnerable group, disproportionately so. And again, Alex will talk about what we're doing around that. And I've recorded some videos actually today for external use, exactly around that, what we're doing with the bikes, what we're doing with the cars, to try and this is a wonderful county. It's a beautiful county, and people love to drive around it, over the moors, over the dale. They absolutely, it's beautiful. But unfortunately, we know that far too many people sometimes just lose their lives pushing the limits at times, and Alex will cover that as well. So we're concentrating on the 4 priorities that you can see there: education, engagement, engineering, and enforcement, which, when it was written in 2019, was quite prophetic, given the police approach to COVID with our engage, explain, enforce, etc. This is exactly where we're at. So that education that we're talking about there, of road users, engaging with people to ensure that we get those the better safety, safer vehicles, engineering, which I know is absolutely one of the most important parts of this, and then finally the enforcement, which tend to be where we come in as police officers, is at that end of it. We still work all the way through this, but people probably associate us with enforcement more than anything else. So focusing on this, we're trying to take that prevention and early intervention approach. And in effect, that means that as partners, we're committed to increasing the effective education and engagement activities, and just working together to ensure the road infrastructure is fit for purpose, signage is clear and visible, and where necessary, as we say, targeting our enforcement to deter and disrupt both inappropriate driver behaviour and also, not forgetting from our side of it as well, the criminal use of the road network, because crime travelling into and out of the county. So I just wanted to pick up on something on education. I thought I'd just remind people on the call of a really simple fact. So please indulge me for a second. So if you travel on a motorway at 70 mile an hour at the speed limit for 30 miles, it will take you 25 minutes. 25 minutes. My maths is right, I've checked it. If you do the same journey at 80 miles an hour, so 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, you'll only save 2.5 minutes. That's it. If you think about that on a rural road, if you think about that 60 mile an hour, if you were able to do 60 mile an hour for 20 miles, of course it's going to take you 20 minutes. But if you break the speed limit and travel at 70 miles an hour for the 20 miles, you'll save less than 3 minutes. Less than 3 minutes on a rural road where you run the risk of losing control of the vehicle, you run the risk of finding yourself in a collision, or potentially finding yourself with 3 points on your license for less than 3 minutes on your journey. So when we start talking about education, it's things like that are just simple facts that are stark. And I would just urge you, next time you're traveling on the motorway and you think, I'll just do 80 because it's quicker, you're going to save about 2 minutes off a journey. So don't do it. So I'll just move on to the next slide, please, Elaine, if we can. So Alex is going to talk through some examples of this, so I won't dwell on it for too long. But if you look at what we've got at the top there, our priorities are safer road users, safer vehicles, safer roads, post-crash response. Now, if you look at the first one, the safer road users, we'll be looking at young road users, those people who are on their first steps onto the road, just taking their tests, for example, young adults and encouraging people to stay within the law. And then third, what we call third age adults. So we know that knowledge, experience, reaction time can deteriorate with age, so that education there. Safer vehicles, I won't go through all these, we're focusing on fleets, people who drive for work, safer goods vehicles, because more than 10% of our collisions involve goods vehicles. Safer roads, we'll be looking at our rural roads, as we've already talked, that highest risk for serious or fatal collisions, particularly with younger drivers between the ages of 16 and 24. And then the post-crash outcomes, the post-crash response, looking at victims, community, and then the vulnerable groups, again, coming back to motorcyclists. How can we take that prevention and early intervention approach to keeping people safe on the roads? Next slide, please, Elaine. Thank you. So I'll skip through these because I do want to get to the bit that is important, which is Alex's bit. So the academic review, money's been allocated from the Commissioner's funding for the Road Safety Partnership, and that is going out to look at an executive report which sets out the need to assess the effectiveness of present and potential enforcement strategies. So what does that mean? So we're going to look at what extent do safety cameras and handheld deployments prove effective in mitigating, the fatal five, so drink and drugs, seatbelts, distraction, speed, and careless inconsiderate driving. We're going to look at to what degree do community speed watch activities serve as an effective means of eliminating excessive speed. And then finally, is it appropriate to implement other enforcement systems such as fixed cameras or average speed cameras to enforce speed limits? So a number of universities have expressed an interest in this, and the procurement process commences at the end of this month, I should say, and we're looking to get that done as soon as possible. In relation to finance, actually, as we're talking now, the tactical group are meeting. Tom Hurst is chairing that. They have access to a fund to allocate to partners to help link to those objectives from our strategic group to deliver the improvements we need. HMIC FRS, we were last inspected in 2020 and we were compliant in all areas, although it's fair to say we're never complacent around that. The national strategic policing requirement, has come out as emphasised the need for the commitment to road safety and ensures that our own officers will be trained to the College of Policing national curriculum. There is a strategic threat and risk assessment nationally, and here in North Yorkshire we have our own as well. And then finally on this slide, OpSnap. So OpSnap is North Yorkshire Police's response to dealing with dash cam footage that we get in. We get quite a lot of that. There's been a huge upturn in that. A lot of people with dash cams reporting offences. So we've got every piece of footage that comes in is received, it's reviewed by specialist staff. If an offence is identified, then we will deal with that. That can be by way of prosecution or by requiring people to take a driver improvement course. All of the details of that is on our website, how you can submit that if you have some footage as well. But we've seen a huge increase in that and had some really good results as a result of it. The next slide, please, Elaine. So the final slide from me, you'll be pleased to know, before I hand over to Alex, just to recap, the strategic direction that we've got is really clear. We're going to continue to focus our efforts on reducing needless deaths and serious injuries on our roads. We're going to continue to grow our partnership approach. We're hiring a coordinator. We're currently out at the moment, I think, for advert for that coordinator, which is going to be pivotal in helping us bring all that partnership work together and make the changes we need. We're going to be publishing an annual report about progress against the strategy, and that will show where our priorities will be for the next phase as well. We are data-led. We're going to be hearing more about that from Alex, but absolutely focus on filling the gaps that we've got in our data. We have had some challenges around data in the past, and we've got an app that will be coming online. It's still about 12 months or more away for officers so they can fill in collision data on their phones. And we've got some compatibility issues in relation to data sharing with other partners. But the police data tends to be the one that most people use because it is pretty much the single truth, really. And then finally, we've got good visibility on our speed management protocol, which I'm sure Alex will cover off as well. If you have a concern around speeding, what you can do, how you can escalate that through to the police as well. And we've been pushing that at local council meetings, social media, and we will continue to do that. So can I hand over to Alex, please?
Thank you. So just an introduction, I'm Temporary Superintendent Alex Butterfield. I'm the Deputy Chair of the tactical group that's sitting, as the boss mentioned, at this very moment in time. So I'm just going to cover off what it looks like at the moment in relation to fatal and serious injury collision data, looking back over the last couple of years and the progress that's been made there. Briefly talk about the tactical action plan and how we've streamlined that to focus it and improve our delivery against the strategic objectives. Also pick out some good work and from a partnership perspective on some of the objectives, whether it's the safer roads or the engagement and education. I'm going to talk about how local risk is identified and our response and some of the challenges that we face. I'll just move to the next slide, please, Elaine. Thank you. So what you see in front of you there is data going back to 2019. This is why my officers get out of bed in the morning, absolutely trying to drive down these numbers. So what you'll see there is a fairly static picture since 2019 in relation to fatal collisions. At the moment, 13, that's just slightly under where we would normally find ourselves. We had a strong start to the year as such, but March was extremely challenging with multiple fatals, extremely tragic for all concerned. But what we are seeing with regards to a very promising trend is on serious injury collisions. So since 2019, we've gone from 605 serious injury collisions on North Yorkshire's roads down to 361 last year. And what I can update you on today is at this point, up until from the 1st of January to the 22nd of May this month, we've had 114 serious injury collisions. And we would expect that number to be about 20 collisions higher at this point in the year. So some early indications before we go into a very busy season that serious injury collisions are falling slightly, as are fatal numbers also.
Alex, can I ask a question about the fatal ones? Because since 2019, those figures have been fairly static, haven't they? So, you know, how is the partnership going to change its tack in more education around these numbers to get those fatals down? And also, is there any data how it's split down as to what has caused those fatal, injuries, as it were? You know, was it from speeding? Was it from a medical episode at a wheel, or, you know, so on and so forth?
Absolutely. The focus really is as Mr. Foskett mentioned earlier, is people are disproportionately dying on our roads if they're riding motorcycles. And so we have to focus very much on what our most risk groups are, and that engagement, enforcement and education piece. And I'm going to touch on some of that moving forward in the presentation, but and again, pushing ourselves forward in a national lead perspective. I've recently taken the Northern Collaboration Working Group for Motorcycle Safety, and we have a day of action where I've got 9 Northern forces involved. I've secured £15,000 worth of funding for an additional 36 officers to be working across the north of England, because of the motorcyclists, approximately 45% of them don't live in North Yorkshire. So our targeted audiences aren't necessarily, our messages aren't necessarily meeting the people that we need to do. That's why we need to approach this in a collaborative effort, looking beyond our boundaries, understanding data, and that's something that this day of action is a start with another ambitious bid that I've put in for a much bigger number to access funds that we can share assets and develop information and insight to make sure that we're targeting the right audiences, and like you say, change that static picture into a reducing picture like we're seeing with the serious injuries.
Oh, well, that is good news, and well done, Alex, for being able to get that additional funding. I suppose out of the fatals, if we're talking about motorcyclists, is it death from speeding, or is it, on the whole, or is it death from maybe vehicles not seeing the motorbikes coming in and out of junctions? What does it look like, these figures that sits behind them?
It is a number of things you've listed, probably most of them there. It's either rider error through speed or lack of ability, pushing the boundaries, and that's where we can bring education in through our fantastic nationally award-winning Bike Safe project, which we were very proud of our team of achieving that accolade. But also we've got to. The motorcycle community don't often want to speak to police officers, and we have to break down those barriers. And one thing is to get them talking about the kit that they love, which is normally a motorbike. So we've, as part of our fleet, we've invested in an engagement H2 Kawasaki that I'm told, because I'm not a rider myself, is the bike of choice for the riding community. And if you just mind, I'll give a quick example. One of our officers was monitoring a motorcycle group, about 12 strong, recently. Followed them for about 15 minutes. They were completely unaware on this H2 bike. He was so impressed with them, he pulled them over, and immediately the members of the riders were anti, getting off their bikes, angry, and he wanted to just congratulate them all on the fantastic riding that they were doing. Talked about the bike, sold them Bike Safe, and to see if they can improve any more. And it's about that, breaking down the barriers to speak to this community, to make them think and talk to them about North Yorkshire is a fantastic place to ride, but do so safely.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So I talked earlier about the tactical plan. The tactical plan previously had quite a number of objectives, and what Tom's done as chair is condensed those into 17 objectives to make them more achievable and more focused. We're taking the 4E's approach, as Mr. Foskett said earlier, and really being focused on the risk and what we're seeing is the picture in North Yorkshire, and getting down to how are we going to do that in the action plan. Of course, with that overlay of the fatal 5, which tends to be the 5 key causes of collisions. Next slide, please.
Alex, can I just ask if you're going to formally publish the progress against this action plan?
Yes, we can do. We can. The first working group following the redesign of those 17 actions is taking place this afternoon, so we'll report up to the strategic group, and I'm going to be touching on some of the evidence that is already happened and ongoing in some later slides, but yes, we can push that through up to the strategic group and publish from there. I'm not going to go through every objective, but just to focus on a couple of them, and then I'll move to what we're actually doing. But the next 4 slides focus on education. So I've mentioned, when we're talking about overseeing and assessing the delivery of education activities to members to ensure maximum impact to reducing the most significant risks. This is our Bike Safe is one example of how we're doing that. Next slide, please. From an engagement point of view, again, as the bottom one there, I've picked out establishing connections with neighbouring counties for road safety partnership and sharing best practice and coordinating activities. The example of some fantastic work in relation to that is, in addition to the engagement I talked about, the unmarked bike, is around the antisocial behaviour and the large car gatherings at Selby Fork, we're working with the local authorities, not only from North Yorkshire in that area, but also Leeds City Council, because the problem is shared. We're just going to push it over each other's borders, so we have to work in collaboration to look at opportunities with using parts of legislation or orders to improve that picture and deter that type of activity, which often comes with tragic consequences of large gatherings of performance vehicles. Next slide, please. So engineering, I'll pick one out there: assisting partners and stakeholders in accessing external funding to facilitate achievement for road safety objectives. Again, we're going to look at tapping into funding whenever is possible, but also post collision, making sure that when fatal collisions occur, that we if there are any engineering solutions that can improve road safety, then we're working closely. John Hunter from North Yorkshire Police and the local authority work closely to see if there are opportunities to make sure that these tragic events don't occur again through an engineering solution. So that's a significant one. And we've seen some localized improvements in speed enforcement, speed numbers coming down where some infrastructure changes, whether that's chicanes built in, road islands, reduction in speed limits and things like that, where it's resulted in a downturn in speeds coming through villages.
Alex, through you to Elliot and to the chief, can I just ask a question? Obviously, you've got both unitary partners, North Yorkshire Highways, and you've got City of York Council as well, there's their highways, on the Road Safety Partnership. And so there's been a lot of talk locally, across North Yorkshire about 20 miles per hour and whether those speed limits should drop. I know that's something that North Yorkshire Council are looking at, but am I right in thinking that they would bring that proposal if they want to, if they were to do that? And have those discussions in the Road Safety Partnership so we can have a wider conversation? Is that the forum that it would normally come to, the route and the process?
Yeah, I think I'll just build this one. Alex and I have actually discussed this fairly recently, in all fairness. Yeah, we have discussed 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in the group. As you would imagine, it forms part of the overall plan, the overall strategy where we need to do this. But yeah, this should be a partnership approach to it, because otherwise, if it's done unilaterally, it'll just be done in isolation of other partners who can't then assist with it. Mm-hmm. So we would expect that to come through to the strategic partnership. We'll have the discussions, a proposal put forward in the same way as ever, but that wider consultation, because what bits of it can each of us support to make that sustainable? And I know that we've discussed this in the past around the sustainability of speed reduction, but I know it's a really emotive thing for people, and speed reduction sustainability is absolutely vital. So we would bring that through the partnership, in my view, Commissioner. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
but can I just be clear? Have we had any formal consultation from North Yorkshire or City of York on any proposed 20 miles per hour speed reducing limits?
No, there's been nothing at the Strategic Road Safety Partnership at the moment. We've literally, it's one of those things that we'll have discussed in passing, but no formal consultation around it at the moment.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to next slide, please. So from an enforcement perspective, just pick one out there in relation to evaluating the efficiency of speed enforcement deployments to determine the most effective measure to reduce risk. So we've obviously got the academic piece that Mr. Foskett talked about there, which will really answer a lot of the questions that have come through from the public. It is time that we do review the position that we have from a speed enforcement perspective. We're aware that we use an agile camera safety van approach to speed management, as well as officers on the ground. and our community speed watch, and hopefully that academic piece will give us a steer on which direction the partnership wish to go moving forward. We are aware other forces are moving away from fixed sights and average cameras to more an agile, and the rationale for when this was introduced is because of our geography, and being able to be agile, to be in the rural locations and use that. But we'll take that academic piece and very much learn from it, and if there are opportunities to bring them through the partnership approach and take them forward through that.
Yeah, because that was going to be one of my questions. We've had a lot of these questions about actually, there's lots of calls within our communities of North Yorkshire and York to adopt the use of speed cameras, whether fixed or average. And it was really, what's your view on this as a partnership? But I suppose you've just answered that, haven't you, in the fact that we're doing this enforcement review through the university. That will give the evidence base to come together as a partnership to be able to have a conversation about it. Elliot, can I bring you in, please?
You can, Commissioner. I think you've just hit the nail on the head, and it brings back to the bit you've just talked about with the 20-mile-an-hour thing. Doing this in conjunction with partners and having that partnership approach will have a much more effective and sustainable way of doing it. The academic piece, which I know you've been kind enough to commission through this, will be absolutely key to sharing the outcome of that with partners. We'll talk about it in the strategic group. We'll include the tactical group as well, because they're the practitioners, the people that really will make a difference. And I'm sure there'll be wide consultation on it when we get that back before we do anything. But Alex is right, some forces are moving away from it. And we have found that the agile approach does work for us. But I do understand how the fixed sites work as well. I've come from a force previously where we had fixed sites, but then moved away from that as well. So
I suppose really, I think let's just talk about this a little bit further, because I know we've had lots of questions about it. It's about what's helping the communities as well. And although mobile speed vans are there for a certain amount of time during the day, once or twice a week, whatever, but fixed cameras are there all the time, aren't they? And, it's about that. What is going to make a difference to the community and to save lives for motorists as well, that is going to be there all the time. And that's why it's important to have conversations with our partners about how we, road engineering, which is the best way. So that's why this enforcement review is so essential, isn't it?
It absolutely is, Commissioner. And the Chief would not be happy if I didn't say that we have to be evidence-led and data-led on this. Because if we decide to go and move to something because we think, oh, that feels like it should be the right approach, we'll completely miss the point of it. And again, enforcement, coming back to my bit at the very start of this, is a partnership approach. This bit in the black here it tends to be, this is where we are, but the engineering parts that you've just talked about tend to be that more sustainable. How do you traffic calming, slowing people down? There's a range of ways that stop people ever getting to the point where they're sitting there with another 3 points on their license. We don't want them to speed and catch them. We want them not to speed at all. So that's where we should be.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Commissioner, and again, I think it answers some of the questions that have come through regarding visibility of our speed management protocol. And this is where the public can report through the North Yorkshire Police website or the Commissioner's website concerns around speeding, and those concerns will be reviewed by our Traffic Bureau at North Yorkshire Police and assessed. And if it meets the threshold, if we've had a number of complaints, then what in reality happens is we install data loggers into those locations to monitor speed over a length of time to truly understand the problem. And then depending on the outcome of those, that data review, that will result in either a community speed watch if it's low level, or if we feel that there is a speeding problem, then a camera safety van deployment will be arranged for that location. And but again, balanced against what does the picture look about collisions in that area to make sure that we're maximising the use of the camera safety vans. So, and again, so that I have seen the questions of what are we doing about a particular village or town in this street. If there are concerns, please report them in that way, and then they will be assessed, and then we'll go through that. We'll go through that route to be able to be data-led and truly understand the problem so we can tailor the response.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk about some of the work that the partnership from various partners have been doing in relation to progress against the plan. I've talked about some of those already. So from a safer road users, we've got an understanding of the strategic threat and risk assessment. So one of the key investments that we've made in the last year or so is a dedicated analyst who is very passionate indeed about this and is producing some phenomenal product that is really tailoring and changing how we deploy as road policing officers and where we can focus our resources. So that's turning into deployment methods where we can be responsive to trends month on month. So I'm assessing those to make sure that we're responsive to trends, but also have a longer view out across summer and winter, so in tailoring the deployment methods to that, using our strategic threat and risk assessment and tackling things like our key vulnerable group, which is motorcyclists. I've mentioned my new role as the chair of the Northern Tactical Road Safety from a motorcycle perspective, and the day of action that we've got on Bank Holiday Monday. From a safer vehicles point of view, and this talks about the partnership here, you know, we've through the tactical meeting, we talk about the number of deployments that we're doing, a number of proactive operations working with the Driver and Vehicle Standard Agency and the Vehicle Operator Service Agency. We board a T-Sport, and a lot of dangerous goods is transported. They hang a left and head down the A19 and travel through our county. And there are, when we do test, some very poor compliance rates from some companies. This is a national issue. I want to make sure that my team and our partnership are making sure that we're stopping vehicles, sending strong messages, taking those vehicles off the roads that are carrying dangerous goods. So we're investing in that as a proactive operation with our partners. We also adhere to the campaigns, the national campaigns. So recently we've had tyre safety operations and localised taxi operations with local authority. I've touched on Opera Public, which is the operation named to the Selby Fork antisocial behaviour, and working with the local authorities there to improve our safer roads. Talked about trend hotspots and our deployment methods in summer and winter. And from a safer roads perspective, this is about officers and our partners working safely on the roads. So we've introduced an additional day's training working on fast roads, and that is going to be rolled out across to the whole force, but the officers most likely to be on those fast roads have been trained now. Post-crash response, we've got a collaboration with our forensic collision investigation units from the Yorkshire and Humber, and that's a year on now, just to improve efficiencies in and resilience in relation to that specialist service. We're developing our major collision investigation units to be the same detective level qualifications as crime. And they'll all be qualified in the next 18 months. And as mentioned before, as part of the strategic policing requirement, there's the training our road policing group to the College of Policing curriculum. And then, like I mentioned before, those engineering opportunities, every opportunity with the local authority to prevent further collisions. Any questions on that slide?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Very proud of our Bike Safe national recognition. Like I said, we're pushing ourselves forward into our key risk group there to make a difference and see a downturn on those fatal numbers. And I'm touching wood at the moment. motorcycle fatalities are reduced this year so far, but we are in well underway with the motorcycle season. We're seeing fire and rescue have a great bike down education process as well. We're seeing double attendances there. We've got the road safety team, which is very unique to policing. We've got dedicated problem solving partnership roles in North Yorkshire, and getting into the schools and the military establishments that we've got, and doing some fantastic awareness work from our road safety team. Very proud of them, and taking every opportunity to bring our partners, including fire and rescue, along to those events. Speed awareness courses, we've changed some, streamlined our file process from a prosecution perspective. So what that's doing is rather than just enforcement, it's moving towards an opportunity to push people towards the education route with speed awareness courses. Engagement, I've talked about the Kawasaki H2, that's that green thing at the bottom that's catching the eye of all the bikers. That's got not only national coverage in all the supplements, but it's actually made its way across the globe, and seeing what we've introduced to get them to engage and talk to us and signpost them to things like BikeSafe. Fire bike introduction, that's been a huge success. So we've got a motorcycle that was previously a police motorcycle, now new livery. Fire service take it out, and again another opportunity. They might talk to a fire officer before they talk to the police, and then we talk to them about bike down, bike safe, get more education, improve standards on the road, again, from an engagement perspective, embedding engagement as a key component in our proactive deployments. I've talked about engagement, and we've seen some engineering solutions in Cowling in relation to some concerns there. So reduction in speed limits, chicane and islands that are introduced, and through the data logger of what happened before and what happened after those changes, we have seen a reduction in speed in Cowling. Enforcement, again, with national campaigns, another two-wheel campaign, another great success story. We are throwing the kitchen sink at it when it comes to these proactive operations to reduce motorcycle fatalities. And again, touching wood, we've gone 2 years now with 0 motorcycle fatalities over Easter. And we can hopefully continue to see that over the weekends ahead. And as the boss mentioned earlier, OpSnap, this is a fantastic prevention tool. The public need to be aware with the increase in that technology, and also cyclists with head cams can submit this footage. With this technology, it doesn't matter if there's a police officer behind you. You still, if you make a decision that falls below the standards of a competent driver, you will be prosecuted if it meets the threshold. So demand is increasing there, and we're just monitoring at the moment, making sure that resource meets demand, because that is a growing industry. Any questions on that one, Commissioner?
No, only that I'm conscious of time, Alex.
Okay.
That's all.
Next slide, please. I'll quickly spin through this. So we've talked about analytical support. I've talked about the hotspot and the deployments and the speed management process. The challenges ahead is really that consistency. We've seen some inconsistent approaches at district level from the working group. So Tom's working hard to make sure that we've got some consistency across North Yorkshire with the pointy end, as the boss mentioned earlier, to make sure that we're doing the doing across the board, not just a localised best practice. Much needed investment. The coordinator, as the boss said, this is key, and supporting and ensuring that the coordinator role is a success is very important to the partnership. Obviously, with the force-wide review in North Yorkshire Police, we're going to make sure that are we still delivering the service as we move our resources into the areas that we very much need them from a safeguarding perspective and other areas of business. So still making sure that I cut my cloth accordingly to be able to deliver that service to the public as well. Next slide, please. Talked about the coordinator deployments over the next 6 months and the finance that we're tracking around investment and reinvigorating it all the time for that strategic partnership involvement at every opportunity. And then in the next 6 to 12 months is using that academic speed enforcement findings through the partnership to inform us moving forward about our approach to road safety. And then as the coordinator, we talked about annual reports at the start of this. As the coordinator gets in post, they'll be able to pull this information together, and then we'll be able to explain to the public in greater detail through that coordinator role and publish that annual report. Thank you.
Alex, I just want to just cover something that you said earlier on, and that was about Cowling. And you were talking about engineering, so working with our partners, working strongly with North Yorkshire Council for re-engineering, post-collision. And I know that there has been some work done there at Cowling, but we have had, and I have had, an avalanche of complaints about actually that more needs to be done at Cowling as well. So please, I think I've already mentioned this before, but please can you put that on, the meeting agenda, to be having a conversation, please, around that, how we can work more closely with the community and our partners around that at Cowling, because we have had many, many questions about it. Thank you.
Certainly.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to change the agenda around a little bit now, because I'm very conscious of time and I want to make absolutely certain we get all these questions answered about the road safety. So I'm going to go straight to that, and then afterwards I'm going to come to the chief about the HMI improvement plan. So we've had loads of questions in, especially from Cowling, Burton and Lonsdale, Skipton. It's been a fantastic response. Thank you so much to everybody that has sent a question in. Questions from Councillor Mann as well about issues, enforcement issues around 20 miles per hour. Too, but so we put them into like overarching questions, and I'm pretty certain most have been already answered in the presentation, but I'm going to go through these questions, and whoever wants to come in and answer them, Alex or Elliot or the chief even, so I'm just going to go through it quickly. So who is responsible for road safety, and how do they work with communities to ensure people are safe? Do these people have an input into planning decisions? So do we have an input into planning decisions?
Yes. In short, yes. So,
okay.
Who is responsible for road safety? The partnership as a whole, rather. It's not just on police or fire and rescue. So the partnership as a whole, and as we've talked about, Commissioner, all comes into that one place.
Okay, next question. Who is responsible for enforcing speed limits, and how is this done? Communities say that the safety cameras are ineffective, as they are never in the right place at the right time, and there's never enough of them. Safety camera vans are positioned in locations where they have previously been killed, so where someone has previously been killed or seriously injured. Do communities have to wait for a serious incident to occur before speeding enforcement and road safety concerns are addressed? Do safety camera vans work in the dark?
So we'll probably pick up a double act on this between myself and Alex, if that's okay. So first and foremost, who is responsible for enforcing speed limits? That's the police. We do obviously use community speed watch, as Alex has talked about as well, so that communities can take some responsibility themselves for helping and do that enforcement. But overall enforcement of this will sit with us. We've had the debate around the effectiveness of safety camera vans and fixed sites, and we're hoping that academic paper will draw that out as well. The bit there is very emotive. You're absolutely right. We prioritise areas where we know people have lost their lives, and it's a dangerous stretch of road, and we would want to put our safety camera vans there to prevent it happening again. But I also get, as a parent myself, the emotive side of this, of thinking, I don't want my child to be a casualty before you do something. So I absolutely understand that. And that's why we have to work not only about the enforcement side of it, Commissioner, but that engineering we're talking about, stopping people speeding in the first place, is absolutely where we should be. Alex, have I missed anything out on that? Probably about the vans working in the dark.
Yeah, no, and the work into the night, it'll come down to prosecution and levels of evidence to that they'll take it to a point where they won't speed and they won't do the enforcement where they don't think it's going to meet the evidential threshold.
Yeah.
But just to add on to that, through the Criminal Justice Department and the Traffic Bureau that are responsible for the camera safety vans, we can provide information. You know, I saw one of the questions was in relation to how many deployments on the A65, for example, and from I believe Mr. Wood, and we can break those deployments down, total offences and things like that. So we can answer these questions to the public, and if there are any specific ones like that, we can respond to them. But yeah, just it's really getting the cameras in the right place where we see the need to be, and unfortunately, like I said, they're happening across our huge amount of geography, and it's we have to be data led to make sure that we can dent those numbers and bring those down and make sure that those families aren't affected moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, next question. If I have a concern about speeding, antisocial road usage, such as noise, racing, untaxed vehicles, who should I report this to and what actions will be taken? We are hearing from communities that speeding motorists and noisy vehicles are affecting the safety and peace of the countryside for motorists, pedestrians and residents, but no action is being taken, or more action is required. What are the police doing about this, and is Community Speed Watch still up and running, and how effective is it?
So Alex has got that. I could answer, but Alex is probably far better placed to answer that, he says.
So yeah, it falls through to the speed management protocol, and again, OpSnap can be used if there's evidence as well. There's a couple of routes to raise this, and then we'll build that evidence base around it to truly understand the problem and put that tailored response in. One of the outcomes that can be is that Community Speed Watch approach. We're through the partnership. Again, we've invested in additional handheld devices that and trained PCSOs to also support our Community Speed Watchers, and we're really going to push forward with that more and more in the future. And increase that, but very much so. We can't be everywhere. We know that, and the communities are very passionate about driving this, and we're very thankful that they're contributing towards improving it.
Okay, next question. How do people apply for a change in speed limit?
Again, this will come down to the partnership response.
It is absolutely the partnership response.
Yeah,
it's
through
absolutely
the
that. This is not something we can do
No.
as a police force, and certainly not on our own. But it's coming, as Alex has said. What's the data? What's the evidence for it? And it goes through that partnership response.
And I think Cowling is a good example of that. There has been a reduction in speed limit through those raised concerns, through the assessment, through the speed management protocol and the data loggers, and now we've tested it and it has improved speeds, reduced speeds in there. Although the perception from the public at this moment in time that it isn't, and that's what we need to follow up to understand why the data is different to the perception.
Yeah, Lisa, can I bring you in quickly?
Thanks, Commissioner. Very quickly, and I suppose it's just absolutely this is a partnership effort, and we need to keep putting the public at the forefront of this. If this is about saving lives and keeping the public safe, but I just wanted to qualify for people and wouldn't want them to leave this meeting without realising that road safety overall is the responsibility of the local authority.
Yeah.
And we have our part to play, but I wouldn't want people to walk away thinking the police are the lead agency in this. We absolutely are part of the partnership. We're absolutely at the forefront of enforcement. But when it comes to, I want yellow lines, I want speed limits changing, the council is the primary agency for road safety. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you hadn't said it, I was going to say it to Lisa. Okay, so this is a biggie, actually. I'm asked this a lot. So why? don't the police enforce 20-mile-per-hour speed limits? And actually, John, Councillor Mann has gone a bit further, and he's asking why actually the police, North Yorkshire Police, why aren't they undertaking periodic and visible enforcement activities around schools?
Alex, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. You know, very emotive. We're talking about children here, and we need to be doing everything we can to protect our children and protect all age groups. So, if a 20-mile-an-hour zone is put in place, the reason why it's been put in place is normally around proximity of the school. So there might be a traffic regulation order that might actually restrict us from doing enforcement as part of that order. But also, when you put 20-mile-an-hour into an area, there'll be other calming measures, speed bumps, islands, and things like that. Now, there's the being agile enough. There's to be in different locations around the county. However, when you're talking about putting a camera safety van into a narrow street near a school, you could potentially be creating another problem. So all of this has got to be balanced. But there are other ways that we can do speed enforcement on there. But we've also got, it comes back to being data led, is where are people dying and being seriously injured on our roads, and the data shows us that it isn't in 20 miles an hour roads, it's in other areas. So where do we deploy our resources in those high harm locations to try and drive those down? But of course, we are going to incorporate this because it's very, very visible to us as a partnership that this is a big issue for the communities, and it's something that we have to listen to, understand, and find ways of approaching it to reassure the public. And we can do that in some of the methods that we mentioned there, including community speed watch, including utilisation of our community support officers, as well as engineering solutions.
Okay.
Reece, sorry, I was just going to say, in conjunction with that, Commissioner, occasionally, you know, where we do get a report of this happening outside schools, we will deploy local officers to the school to give that high visibility in the area as well. And I think that's happened recently with other schools in the county side of the command as well.
Yeah, and Elliot, you and I were talking about a Pacific area in Oaklands and Hanash and Harrogate.
That's right.
Last week as well, and I think it's really important. If we can do that, we should do that. There's a lot of community concern down there at the moment.
Yeah, and bringing this, Commissioner, bringing the education. Some schools are bringing their own teachers into this working with police as well, which is really good practice, and it really does help.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know that Councillor Mann and Andrew Jones have been concerned about this, the MP, and I'm really grateful for you to listen to my concerns and hopefully action it. Right, 2 more left, and really quickly, what should people do if they have a concern about parking on pavements or across junctions? And also, really importantly too, we haven't talked about cyclists, which we have hundreds and hundreds of cyclists who cycle across our beautiful county. And really it's about, there's, you know, the education piece about for motorists and cyclists who share the space on the roads as well. Is that something the partnership will be talking about too?
So if I pick up the first bit around parking, it's kind of on pavements and things. And if there's an obstruction, if it's in a dangerous position, if it's causing an obstruction to the road, if it's parked somewhere where it could cause a danger to road users, etc., then actually we'll attend that. We will go to it. And if we're in the area, if we've got PCSO, for example, in the area as well, or an officer in the area, we'll probably attend anyway and go and look where it's antisocial parking, where people are parking across each other's drives, parking on pavements, etc., then that's not something we would routinely deploy to. So that's that side of it. If I give the next bit to Alex, which is around the cyclists.
Can I, sorry, Alex, before that, can I just come in? You can contact your local North Yorkshire councillor or York City councillor, and they'll be able to take that forward. If you are experiencing somebody parking over your entranceway, your driveway, or in front of a junction, they'll be able to assist you with that. Yeah, sorry, Alex.
No, not at all. very much like motorcycling, cyclists want to come to North Yorkshire and cycle on our roads and do the Tour de Yorkshire, and we welcome them. Please come to our county and enjoy the beautiful countryside, but we need them to be for it to be safe for them to do that, and it's absolutely a key message, especially in a more built-up area like the centre of York. We have a close pass operation, which is education around making sure that as vehicles move around cyclists, that they're doing so safely with plenty of room, and making sure that blind spots are covered when turning into junctions and things like that. So we do need to do that. Hasn't been revisited in the last 12 months. We need to go back to that. So we will do so. I've had conversations this morning when I saw that question myself with the road safety team, so they'll be picking that up. But also there's the op snap side of things. Is as that gets more and more momentum, I think motorists on our roads will realise that people are wearing head cams and are monitoring, and then we can take that action as well. But it's something that we'll revisit because it is important, and we want to encourage people to travel safely on our roads.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Can I just say that that's been a great presentation. Thank you. I think we've got across all the questions. If people are watching and we haven't covered and given you an answer to any of your questions, or you want some further information, please don't hesitate to email us back in and we'll cover them off for you, please. But we're a bit time limited now, but I think there's been a good conversation talk about that subject. So thank you very much to Elliot and to Alex too. So we'll come on to the Chief now, Lisa, to talk about HMIC improvement plan, please.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I'm hoping Elaine has got the slides in the background and can pop them up on the screen. There's only a couple of slides and I will be brief. I'm really mindful of time. So moving on to the next slide, please, Elaine. So this is about our improvement plan. So just to set the background to this, this is in relation to our HMIC, so His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary is our independent audit body who come in and inspect policing in respect of police efficiency, effectiveness and legitimacy. So you'll have heard it called the Peel inspection. So that audit body inspect every force in the country, and they not only do the overarching Peel inspection of efficiency, effectiveness, legitimacy for every force, they also do lots and lots of thematic inspections. So you'll have seen on some of these public meetings that the Commissioner has chaired our National Child Protection Inspection. We've also had a custody inspection this year, and we pick up the learning from other thematic inspections, even if they don't involve our force being inspected. So if we're not a dip sampled force, we still take the learning from those thematic inspections. So this improvement plan update is about our overarching improvement plan in response to our Peel inspection, which took place in the autumn last year and reported on the 17th of March this year. But we've obviously been working on it since our debrief in November last year, straight after the initial inspection findings. So we've got a very detailed chart to show you in a couple of slides' time. But overall, there is a detailed improvement plan, and overall, the key update for today is the overall improvement plan is on track. There are some exception areas that we monitor in detail, but overall, out of the plethora of improvement actions that are on that plan, we are overall on track, and you'll see that on the chart that I'll show you shortly. When we refer to assurance work, so you might say to me, how do you know that you're on track? Some of it is self-reported. So some of this is we assess the force against the characteristics of good. So HMIC describe in every area of policing that sits in that Peel framework, there's a performance assessment framework. And within that assessment framework, it describes what do the characteristics of good look like in every area of policing that they test. And we ask for self-reporting from the organisation. So we ask out to every area of the business, here is the criteria for good. Is this what we do on a daily basis? And people obviously report that back to us. But as we've found, and I'm sure the Commissioner might have questions about this, how do we actually know that's true? So I describe it a little bit, if we're going to refer to food maybe, as you've got a great cake recipe and you say to somebody, have you got that cake recipe and have you made the cake? And everybody says, yes, it's great. But unless you actually go and test that it exists and it's got the right ingredients, how do we actually know that that thing exists in reality and to the required standard of the characteristics of good? So that assurance work, we've started to reality test those characteristics of good, not only taken people's word for it that they say that something is good by their subjective opinion of it. There's an objective assessment of whether that thing meets the criteria of good as per HMIC's standards. So what does the governance look like around this? So how do we undertake that work? So next slide, please, Elaine. Fingers crossed, here we go. So in terms of our improvement plan, there is a whole governance structure around testing against that improvement plan and the characteristics of good. As you can see on this slide, I chair a COT improvement board. So that's a Chief Officer Team Improvement Board once a month. What comes to that meeting are the exceptions. So the overall chart you're about to see shortly comes to that meeting, and then we really get into the detail of where the exceptions are, where something is not on track against that improvement plan. So I hold the Deputy Chief Constable to account for the delivery of that improvement plan, which sits in the Deputy Chief Constable's portfolio of delivering overall day-to-day delivery of service to the public to keep them safe. What I will say is the characteristics of good absolutely reflect the police and crime plans, delivery of an exemplary police service, and reflect our plan on a page, which is the way we're going to deliver the police and crime plan and the improvement plan of delivering an exemplary service. So something that's very good all of the time, exhibits best practice that others would want to follow. So it resonates with the Peel assessment, the police and crime plan, and our own plan on a page of delivery. So the deputy holds to account and assures himself of the activity that's going on against this plan through his risk and assurance board. So that's a monthly meeting, it's on a cycle, and that looks at different thematic aspects each month, but once every 3 months covers the whole strategic framework, if you like, of the direction of travel and delivery of those work streams. And as you can see here, there are very specific detailed boards that take place that are chaired by the Assistant Chief Constables and the Assistant Chief Officer. You can see just a few listed here in terms of operations board, people meeting, there's a collaboration steering board now as opposed to a group, and change board and executive board that all feed into that process to make sure the detailed work then feeds up to the risk and assurance board. So there's a whole governance structure in place. And then sitting at improvement board, we talk about which areas have then been independently assurance tested by that methodology that we just talked about, somebody physically going out and testing what we think exists on the ground. So next slide, please, Elaine. We're nearly there. I think this is the last slide.
I've just got, Lisa, I'm really sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
I've just got the key update slide on mine. I just want to check with everyone else. Are they seeing any other slides? We've kind of jumped to the governance one. I've now got high level milestone view. Sorry. Okay,
Do you want
that's
to
good.
go back to the governance slide, Commissioner?
It might be good to touch on it, please.
It was on my screen, but I'm sorry that it's missed you. So can you see it now?
I can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. So that's what I've just talked through. Obviously, won't talk through again, but is there any questions, please feel free to raise them.
Yeah, well, obviously, I know all about this governance, so I've got no questions. I just thought it was make sure that everybody had seen it. That's all. OK, we can go on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So finally, and I appreciate this is a very busy slide, sitting underneath this, and it is discussed in much more detail at the Executive Board, where the Commissioner scrutinises our performance against these milestones. As you can see, this is an overarching milestone view, high level. You will see, as a result of the legend on the bottom in purple, there are a number of red areas there. So I'll pick just one to explain the methodology here. So at the Improvement Board, we pick these areas that are by exception, that are red, that are not on track. For example, one of them is, so under ACC, local policing, the very first red one there says reduce backlog. So we talked earlier in the performance pack, and that's why I've picked on this one because there's some context to it. The CROM, so you remember the crime recording, finalisation of all those 17,000 crimes down to less than or around about 3,000 now. So that is off track where it says reduce backlog because we estimated it would take us until about March to get to the 500. Once people started finalising those crimes and we put the people in that unit and we realised exactly how long it takes somebody to finalise a crime, and actually some of them are more complex than others, it takes longer than you think. Then we also hadn't factored in the bank holidays, where those people are not paid. So we pay extra pay on bank holidays. So therefore we deliver core policing on bank holidays, because we want to make sure we efficiently use our budget where it's most felt to keep the public safe. And we don't want to pay enhanced pay rates for people to do work in an office where the public don't feel the safety that's delivered by those resources. So we didn't count in that no finalisations would happen on those bank holidays while people are not in the office. So that is red because we are not going to deliver it where we thought we were going to deliver it. You've seen that we've moved that milestone. We're on track to get to the new milestone of getting to the 500 by June. So that just explains what this milestone view looks like. And where it is red, we really go into the detail of why aren't we there? Do we understand why we didn't get there when we thought we would? What plans have we put in place to meet the new milestone now that we have more information about the achievement of that outcome? And I think that is the last slide, Commissioner. If anybody's got any questions on any of the milestones that they can see on here or any further updates.
Yeah, actually, can we just leave that last last bit of the presentation up, actually, please, because I'm going to be asking a couple of questions on. Elaine, if you could do that, I'd be grateful. So for me, the one that's, is it coming back? Here we go. So for me, obviously, I've seen this. This comes to my executive board every month, and the chief constable has to be able to talk to it and explain why things are on track or aren't on track. But the recruitment plan and a 3-year workforce plan, I'm really concerned about, Lisa. It should have been delivered in Q3, Q4, and it isn't. Do you know when it will be delivered?
So the recruitment plan and workforce plan are now written. So they exist in text. And the workforce plan has been sent through to HMIC to make sure that it is of the required standard. The recruitment plan is currently being tested through a vacancy meeting that is being chaired by our Assistant Chief Officer to make sure that it is an effective means of tracking recruitment. So we can have a plan, but if it doesn't survive contact with the enemy, as they say, it's not an effective plan. So both of those things are now in place, but being tested, shall we say, one by HMIC by their standards and the other through the actual live use of that recruitment plan. We would have liked those things to be in place earlier, but we need to make sure that they are effective rather than just, and it's a little bit back to the cake recipe. We've got the recipe now, but is it in reality making a difference to how we plan the workforce and how we recruit and track our recruitment? And we need to make sure that they are effective tools and effective strategies to ensure that we deliver. And it's back to the public service, isn't it? Resources deliver service and keep people safe and keep them feeling safe. So it's about achieving the true purpose of having those things rather than just having the existence of the strategy.
I suppose I've got another question off the back of that. So earlier we've heard that you've been able to, you've got 1,600, well, it was 45, but, of police officers. But yet on here, the recruitment plan is outstanding. So I think it's a bit confusing probably for the public to be going, well, that doesn't make sense at all, does it? So could you just talk to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so a recruitment plan is about having the overarching holistic plan of recruitment for the whole organisation in place in a structured way for the future planning of the organisation and tracking against it. So you're really clear about when a post becomes vacant, how long it takes to recruit into that post, the underspend that you accrue as a result of somebody leaving and it taking you longer. So most people can leave in 28 days, and our average time to recruit at the moment, which is not good enough, is 100 working days, which we need to shorten. Absolutely. Some of it's workplace, labour market issues, but some of it isn't. Some of that is about our internal performance focus and our internal processes. So the difference is we've got a really clear plan for bespoke areas of business. So police officer recruitment, really clearly well-tracked plan, is documented well, is executed well. We, as you can see from the statistics, we have those police officers in force in the time when we expected to have them in, trained, inducted, and delivering a service out on the streets once they come out the other end. But the recruitment plan also is all of our resources. So when you look at delivering an exemplary service, that has to be every part of our business. And that includes our police staff. And we do not have the same comprehensive plan for recruitment of police staff in a planned way as we do for police officers. So the recruitment plan is not on track despite The police officer recruitment you can see as a success because it has to be the whole organisation being joined up and having a comprehensive recruitment plan across the board so that we can deliver an exemplary service in everything that we do.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I've got another question about, obviously you can see a lot of blue on here. You've done an awful lot of work and completed a lot of these items in quarter 3, 4, and going into quarter 1 of this year. But how are you assuring yourself that the areas that have been signed off are embedded, so that positive progress is maintained going forward? Because there's been a phenomenal amount of work being done to improve, but it's about how is it properly embedded? Are you assured of that? And the next question after that is, are you happy as to where the improvement plan is at the moment?
So thank you, Commissioner. I'll start with the end question, if I may. So obviously I'm not happy about the milestone areas on here that haven't been achieved within those timeframes, but I am satisfied that they've been explored fully and there are now plans in place for those new milestones and the reasons why they weren't achieved to be addressed. So I'm satisfied from that perspective that there are detailed action plans behind each of these red areas, but of course we would have wanted them to be delivered on track. I'm obviously satisfied with all of the things that are on track as per the action plan. So then moving forward from that, the assurance testing will then, once something is signed off as completed and implemented, we move into the assurance phase. So we then make sure the independent assurance of those implementation areas, so those areas where people are telling us it's been implemented, are then tested independently to assess that they do meet the characteristics of good by the independent objective standard, rather than the person, because quite often the individuals implementing these areas of business are the experts and people who work in those fields of work. They're not independent people from outside of that area of business. True assurance is somebody external, like our HMIC audit, for example. True assurance is an independent person of that area of business going in and testing it by the standards in an objective way. So we move into the assurance phase post-implementation to test that it exists. And then moving on to your first question, Commissioner, of how do we know it's embedded? So our plan on a page is about delivery of service consistently, all of the time. This is not a poster campaign. This is not, can we get to the autumn and satisfy HMIC that we did this one-off? This is embedded in, this is how we behave and how we deliver, and the standards by which we deliver our policing service going forwards consistently. So the characteristics of good shouldn't just be for an inspection, and that isn't the purpose of them. This is about keeping the public safe and making them feel safe and achieving our mission through a delivery of an exemplary service consistently all of the time in everything that we do across the organisation. So this is not a, can we get there in the autumn? This is way beyond that. So we are embedding through our performance development and performance review process, the characteristics of good sit in people's PDR objectives going forwards. It's not about achieving the inspection framework. Is this behaviour being demonstrated consistently all of the time? So that then plays out in our performance framework. So our force performance meeting that links to then the department performance meeting, team performance meetings, and right down to individual performance assessments will measure people's performance against the characteristics of good all of the time, and not just for the purposes of an inspection. And again, we've then got to make sure that independent objective assurance testing takes place to make sure those standards are meeting the characteristics of good by the objective standards and not by the standards of the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, thank you. And from the NCPI re-inspection, also there was a number of improvements. Will that be folded into the peel inspection in September, October? Will they be looking at certain areas that have brought up concern to NCPI?
Absolutely, Commissioner. So you're quite right in the NCPI inspection, which was a thematic inspection, that's a national inspection framework. Out of the 10 recommendations that we received in the first inspection round, 6 out of 10 of those were delivered. The other 4, as obviously the people watching this and yourself scrutinised very recently, still had work to do. Those areas are now being scrutinised and looked at through a vulnerability board and a detailed milestone plan meeting that sits underneath the vulnerability board so that they can be looked at in that level of detail. They are predominantly about safeguarding. And those areas of safeguarding sit in the peel framework. So one aspect of the appeal framework is absolutely about some of those aspects of NCPI that sit with offender management, missing from home vulnerability, investigation of online abuse and child sexual exploitation. So a lot of those themes that sit in NCPI are also sitting in the appeal framework about our effectiveness in investigating and protecting the vulnerable in society, and will be retested as part of the appeal inspection that's coming in the autumn this year.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I don't have any further questions to ask. Thank you very much, Chief Constable Lisa, for doing this. I think it's so important that going forward that we have this agenda item so the public can demonstrate, North Yorkshire Police can demonstrate the improvement and in a very transparent manner, and be able to have that conversation with the public and to, you know, have to get that trust and confidence back. So thank you very much. Look forward to further improvements in a couple of months when you come back to us. And obviously through my office and myself be scrutinising you in between time too. So thank you. Right, we're going to go on to the spotlight topic now. These are questions that have come in to the office through complaints or queries that I've been asked. Now, we're running out of time today, so I'm just going to go to one of them, which we've had over 50 complaints from the public in relation to fox hunting and the approach taken by North Yorkshire Police. So there are allegations that wildlife crime has been allowed to take place and reports to the police were not taken seriously. So the questions are, how do North Yorkshire Police engage with hunting groups within the county and ensure that illegal activity is addressed? Does North Yorkshire Police Rural Crime Team ever engage with hunting events and check hunting activities to ensure they're carried out with accordance to the law? And how many cases of illegal hunting activity occurrences have been reported to North Yorkshire Police in the last 12 months, and what were the outcomes? Thank you.
I think I'm going to answer this question, but I'm really mindful actually that Alex has a lot to do with the Rural Task Force, so I'm quite sure that he can expand on some of the things I'm going to talk about. So again, just mindful of time and keep it brief. So thank you for the questions. So yes, we spend a lot of time dealing with wildlife crime in North Yorkshire. It's a real focus for us as a rural force. And that's why we've got a dedicated rural task force, and we do engage really closely with the National Wildlife Crime Unit and do a lot of work around this. But I do appreciate that we cover such a big rural area that has such a lot of wildlife that there are still matters that we need to tackle. So specifically on these questions, Commissioner, so just setting the scene, the usual season for this is between August and May as a time frame, if you like. So predominantly cub hunting gets reported to us from August through to the end of October. And then fox hunting is predominantly in November to the end of April, although obviously hunting complaints can happen at any time of the year, but that's the predominant period. Over the past 12 months, we've had 31 incidents reported to us as North Yorkshire Police. It might be multiple calls for the same event, but it's 31 actual reported incidents. But as I say, there might be some overlap there. And these are reports where there is suspected illegal fox hunting. We still have one incident that's under investigation, which relates to a hunting incident in Rydale. All the others have been resolved, and I appreciate they might not have been resolved to people's satisfaction. But for example, when people call the control room, there's a very clear question set that the call handler goes through. So you might find some of the logs have been closed as no further action, because when the call handler has gone through the question set, it's somebody ringing up with some anecdotal information about fox hunting. They haven't actually witnessed anything. There's no evidence. There isn't physically anywhere for us to go and carry out any live inquiries, for example. So that's why those logs would be closed, because there isn't physically anything. It's intelligence, but it is really good intelligence, and we act on that intelligence. So the fourth stance is we investigate all hunt-related incidents that are reported. And one of our values is impartiality. And the other values we have in our organisation are integrity and respect. So when I talk about impartiality, we investigate every report. It doesn't matter who's reported it. And we appreciate there is tension between those who perhaps are being accused of illegal activity versus hunt groups versus those people that try to disrupt hunt activity. We will respond impartially to all allegations of hunt-related incidents and crimes. Fox hunting is not currently a National Wildlife Crime Unit priority, but we do take calls very seriously, as I say, because that is, as North Yorkshire, we do have a lot of incidents here in North Yorkshire reported to us, and that's reflected in the 50 complaints that you've mentioned yourself, Commissioner. So officers investigate with impartiality. We keep channels of communication open, and you asked again in that question there about our visits and our engagement. We absolutely engage right across the rural community in relation to this issue, and we visit some of the most complained about hunts. So during the next hunt year, we've got a calendar of the most complained about hunt locations, and we go out proactively into those places and engage with those communities on, and as I say, in all stakeholders in this environment we engage with, and the Rural Task Force prioritises attending those incidents during that hunt season period. So I hope, and I'll pause there just because of time, and I know Alex wants to come in perhaps from some of the work he's done on Rural Task Force.
Very quickly,
do take it seriously.
Very quickly, Alex, please, can you come in?
Yeah, it will be quick. It's just it is a very challenging offence to get over the line from an evidential perspective, meet the charging threshold. But what we do is we work closely with specialist CPS support to ensure that when we do have cases that may come close to it, that we can proceed if the evidential threshold's met. And so we're getting the best advice from National Wildlife Crime Unit and CPS to ensure where opportunities are that we can.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, it's the end of the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody who's inputted, sent in questions, and been watching today. Really appreciate it. It's absolutely fantastic to have so many questions coming in from the public. It's brilliant. The next meeting will be on the 22nd of June, and that's for the Fire and Rescue Service. So please submit your questions for that one. You can start doing that straight away. Okay, so it just leaves me to say have a lovely afternoon and evening tonight, and thank you very much for watching.